Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. So right before Creative Assembly left on their Christmas break, they provided us with a high-res version of the Warhammer 3 campaign map. Now, a lot of people have been talking about what this means and so on, and to be honest, we've seen the majority of the map from Warhammer 1. So what I want to do is something a little different because I've been going over the lore books and so on, and I've realized there's a lot of potential DLC options here just with what we have provided right now. There was a bit of concern throughout the community that because there's so much of the Empire and the World's Edge Mountains that we wouldn't see a lot of DLC, but if we go logically by where people are placed and so on, there is quite a few possible options. So what I want to do in this video is discuss the possibilities of certain DLC options, and hopefully I'm right because we do have some time. Obviously it's a bit early to talk about DLC, but the fact is a lot of locations here just really speak to me. Now before anything I want to talk about the map itself because there's a lot to talk about in all honesty. So Game 3's map is looking rather big. We can see a lot of territories, we can see a lot of areas already split up into their own respective provinces and so on, and interestingly enough, which came into a shock to me to be honest, was the fact that we have almost all the Empire. We're missing, unfortunately, Averland and Solent for some reason. More gutted about Averland because I was always hoping for Marius, but hey, there's still a chance that he'll appear as a FLC as he really didn't have any unique units tied to him. Now, if we look at it properly, it is rather large. I know some people thought that it was a bit small, but keep in mind that unlike Warhammer 2, where the campaign map itself had a massive amount of water, this is very little bodies of water. In fact, it's just mostly land, and we can see a lot of territories. Also, apologies if you can hear some squeaking in the background. My dog got a squeaky toy for Christmas and she's really enjoying it. Anyways, so if we look at everything, it's mostly Empire stuff that we've seen, but if we look far north, we've got something which hasn't been explored in Warhammer lore, like, at all, really. These are the Chaos Waste, the Northern Waste itself, which most stuff that we know is that it's just inhospitable, but obviously this looks like territory which will be controlled under by different Chaos tribes, obviously some demon factions and so on. Obviously we've got Cathay to the east, the Mountains of Morn for the Ogre Kingdoms, and right below that we do have the lands of the Chaos Dwarfs, so there's a lot of new areas to play with. So now, using my background knowledge of that of Warhammer Fantasy for the past, well, 2.5 decades, I think I can more or less point out where they're going to be doing some DLC. So let's just jump right in. First we'll go over the Chaos Dwarfs, as well, they're pretty much obvious. They don't have to confirm it. We know they're coming anyway, because they are one of the last few army books that had a 8th edition supplement and an official army book, and, well, all their territory is in the map. If they weren't going to add it in, especially with that much territory, then people would be mad. Well, that and the fact that they were Chaos Dwarfs, they were horrendously overpowered in the tabletop, but really stupidly expensive because they were Forge World army, so people liked them, but they generally didn't play them, because, you know, Forge World. So I'm just going to plant their logo right here, as this is the center of the kingdom of Ofzarnar Garund. Now, we don't know exactly how many Legendary Lords they would get. They would likely be the first DLC, well, first race pack that we'll ever get, because generally, after the Blood DLC, it's usually a race pack. As to how many lords, well, that's unknown, because in Warhammer 2 there was a big thing about just having the race pack and being fully completed, or near enough complete, as that would give us 4 legendary lords, an almost complete roster and so on. That was like the Tomb Kings. The issue is, though, that we've seen with the Ogre Kingdoms that they're missing stuff, so they're obviously leaving stuff out for DLC, only 2 legendary lords. I really hope that the Chaos Dwarves at least get 3. 4 is great too, but there's not that many characters, but it would be a massive shame if it was just 2 legendary lords, as yeah, there's options, and it would be a shame if we just paid, what, 20-something pounds for a race pack which won't have, well, the full roster. It might be missing something, and that would be really disappointing, because we are dealing with, well, near enough complete Chaos factions. They're going to be doing a lot of damage. There's obviously loads of enemies that the Chaos Dwarfs would have. North with the Ogres, east with Cathay, and then obviously west with all the Imperials, Standard Dwarfs, and all that. So, hey, 3 Legendary Lords is fine, but nothing less. Maybe a bit more if they can find something obscure, but even then, you know, it's Chaos Dwarfs. By the way, I'm not going in any specific order where I'm expecting DLC released in this way, it's just more, this is what's coming up to mind, and with that we're going to start with one which I think is going to be like a given at this point. One where most people have been calling it the Princess and the Maggot, or the Witch and the Maggot, and so on. This is obviously Wissenland versus Tamukhan, a Wissenland versus Nurgle DLC, which obviously mirrors that of the Thrones of Chaos series. You have to keep in mind too that we've already gotten some stuff from the Tamukhan DLC in the Nurgle roster, which is the Plague Toads. So by them adding in the Plague Toads, it just kind of makes sense that they're acknowledging that as canon. It was a glorious book. They had loads of different unit options and so on. We're not going to talk about the units themselves, we're just going to talk about any basic stuff. So obviously Wissenland would be playable here, which is interesting that they kind of managed to fit Wissenland on the map. I mean, just barely, but still, it's enough to be able to put a DLC Lord there. And yeah, this is Elseth. It was very unlikely that we were ever going to get the Elector count of Wissenland anyway, because she really only shows up in like a few paragraphs of books, and that's pretty much it. There's no official model. I believe there was some art, but it's so old that it could be considered non-canon, where Elseth could do really well here. We also know that, obviously, since Gelt leads Solent, that you don't have to be an Elector count to lead it. And she's a nice, well-liked character. She also holds a Carmine Dragon, so yeah, you know, pretty popular. Then obviously we have to talk about Tamukhan, which would likely be in the Eastern Steppes, or yeah, pretty much the Eastern Steppes, because that's more or less where his lore puts him at. Keep in mind that the area itself has changed dramatically, but that's pretty much where the Kurgans are from, and Tamukhan is a Kurgan. Now, I don't imagine that this would be the areas where you would play as and so on. Like, they might switch it around, considering, like they do with, say, for example, Nakai and the Hunts Marshal. You'll start in different locations and so on, just to kind of fit with the theme. So if you're starting off as Tamukhan, you might be in the Chaos Dwarf lands, closer to Wissenland, because you're trying to go that way to do your damage. And if you start as Elseth, she could literally be in Wissenland, with Tamukhan already very close. Having just thought of this, you might notice the Avalon logo on the top right hand side, and that's literally because, well, there's no way that they can do a DLC for Avalon because there's no missing units and so on, whereas Null does have some things, and obviously the Marienburg landship and so on, which yes, fits more with Marienburg, but it's more of the case that it kind of fit with the Empire army list from the book itself. So maybe Avalon could be the FLC for this, because it's just a way to introduce him. Obviously Marius Lightdorf had his own model too. He should be dead at this point in the storyline, but then again, yeah, like this is his own story. We have characters that are long dead, which are here, so why not have that and have him as a character that you could only play if you own this DLC and you have access to the big mega map. This is pretty much how it works for Dryker, and I think that works out quite well. It's just a way to introduce a well-loved character, plus, like, it's the Elector count that I really like, so I would like to see him in some way, shape, or form. Again, just a suggestion. So with the Wolflands being added in, it looks like right below would be the territories of the Broken Teeth and that of the Plane of Bones, being mixed up most possibly because the name isn't even there. Maybe it's even an area that won't be playable at the beginning, but if my assumption is correct, as you can already see, then that paves way for the big daddy of Undeath, Nagash himself. This is mainly because, well, it's Nagash, and a character like that is definitely gonna get some sales, whether or not he looks like his End Times variant or his derpy model from the past is unknown, more than likely End Times variant because, yeah, aesthetic. Nagash is definitely big money. I don't know if they would pin him up against someone. Honestly, the way I think about it is they would bring him in by himself, obviously with some new units, some mixture of Tomb Kings, Vampire Counts, and likely Morghast, because while they say that there's no end time stuff in the story, it doesn't mean that they can't add in units that were introduced in the end times, as they've been doing that throughout the whole series, just really quietly. Maybe they would just introduce him as a DLC, but without a rival, because, well, Nagash doesn't really have rivals. He's just more, I hate everyone and everything, and I want to rule, and so on. And it would be kind of cool if he had his own, like, thematic campaign that was completely different, treated like a race pack. It wouldn't be as expensive as a race pack, but with his own, like, everything is completely new, a unique story, unique campaign, and so on. It would still be in the same map, because that works out really, really well, same as the Vampire Coast and so on, but just Nagash, new units, new story, and possibly new maps and so on. Just go full ham with that, because he really doesn't need a rival, or at least I don't think so. I could be wrong. Obviously, I have been wrong in the past, and if you you guys think of a different way he could be implemented, let me know in the comments below, because that could work out really well. It's always nice to discuss these types of things, because Creative Assembly do look at these videos for inspiration. It's been confirmed by Creative Assembly staff in an interview long ago that they're going to look at Norsker eventually for a possible rework. So obviously we're going to get a DLC, as Norsker still only has 2 legendary lords, and it would be nice to have at least 1 more, or 2 would be nice, but hey, I'm not going to get greedy because this is a really horrible faction. The possible character that could be added in would be Eagle Styrbjorn, as he is a scaling, and funny enough, you know, we've seen his faction in all 3 games, so it's very possible, and it's not a bad idea just to have that faction there, as we're already used to the logo. Many people have seen it. In fact, Eagle has been, well, he's been modded in by multiple people because, well, he's a good character, it's nice to bring in, and he's another interesting one. He's not a mono-god character either. I believe that he was dedicated to Khorne, so it just brings in a lot of possibilities, possibly even just having some bloodletters in the army too. It would be nice to have some mixture. Plus, well, we know that Norsker really desperately needs a rework, so this could just be fun. In terms of opponents, well, it could work out really well to see a Kislevite, possibly an Ungol character. As there's not really too many options, keep in mind that obviously Norsker's not going to fight against the Chaos Gods because, well, they're dedicated to the Chaos Gods, and I really doubt that a seafaring faction, such as the Norskans, are going to go, well, to Grand Cathay, especially since, you know, there's no ocean in Cathay at the moment. Plus, I think thematically this would work out really, really well. If you think about it, the Norskans themselves are kind of tribal and so on. The Ungols themselves are very tribal too. So you get some more stuff for the Norskans, obviously a rework and so on. And when it comes to the Kislevites, well, you know, a hag and anything going around that type of lore. The older stuff in Kislevite society, which, let's be very honest here, kinda needs to be implemented, as right now we're only seeing new stuff and it's kinda weird. In terms of FLC, it could literally be another Norskan, no new units or anything, but maybe dedicated to Nurgle or Sinesh or Zinch. It really much depends, but this could be a character that could literally be thrown in and only available in the Grand Campaign map, same as my suggestion for Averland. Nothing too out there, but I think that could work out really well, and that allows you to move characters around and so on. Next would be Gracier Thankwall, as really he kind of counts as DLC in a sense, because I'm imagining he'll be the White Dwarf incentive. It just makes a lot of sense because we have Gotrek and Felix and also the White Dwarf himself as their respective White Dwarf lords, so this one kind of makes sense too. Everyone's favorite failure is eventually going to show up. I think even Creative Assembly confirmed that at one point too. Now, where he would be located is kind of strange because there's really no place that he has a base. Well, yeah, he does have a clan that he controls and so on, but they're actually in the lands of Talia. I'm just giving him a generic possible start position, which is obviously in the Mountains of Morn, very close to Grand Cathay, as, well, we all know Thankwall. He's a character which would likely try to go to Grand Cathay to steal some important jade. He could literally start anywhere, that's the great thing about the Skaven, but obviously he doesn't need to be too close to, say, for example, Hellpit. He's kind of close here to the lands where, obviously, Snikich is, but I'm imagining that Snikich might get moved to the Warpstone Desert. Obviously, this is just pure speculation, but it kind of makes sense considering that, obviously, Clan Eshen were well known in the East. So, for another DLC featuring the Empire, which I'm assuming might happen a lot, I've got what I imagine to be a decent idea. Obviously, this is speculative, but I'm imagining that Creative Assembly might go for something like this. So, Boris Todbringer, we're always expecting. In fact, you know, he's got his own unique list if we go back to 6th edition, and Creative Assembly have been going back to earlier editions just to kind of get some special stuff. So, he can have a whole unique army with the Art Ulrich as a legendary hero. It kind of makes a lot of sense. When it comes to a possible enemy, a lot of people might think Festus the Leech Lord and so on, which, yes, I understand would be kind of cool, but that would be a bit too much Nurgle versus the Empire. So I think a cool matchup would be that of Empire with Midland versus Khorne. Now, there's 2 possible legendary lords here, so one could either be the playable legendary lord for the DLC and one could be FLC, or the other way around. We know in terms of story, during the end time specifically, and I'm not going to be referencing that a lot, that Kabanda, one of the most powerful bloodthirsters, was trying to go to Midland because, well, you know, there's a little bit of a thing there that kind of leads to blowing up the world. Now, I doubt that they would add in Kabanda because, first off, he was never really in Warhammer Fantasy lore until until the end times, but that plot could still be expanded in a certain way, maybe with Valkyr the Bloody or with Skulltaker. Either way would work really fine as long as we end up getting both eventually. Now, it works in such a way that I'm imagining that Skulltaker would start in the Blood God's domain because, you know, he's quite the popular bloodletter. It would make sense for him to be in Khorne's domain. Now, with regards to Valkyr, while she is a Norskin and does lead Norskin tribes, I don't know, like, Norsker is already kinda, like, well, it's really stuffy in there already, and there's only 2 legendary lords. We can expect a third when Norsker eventually gets another DLC, and I really doubt that she would be a Norskan legendary lord, because I think a lot of people wouldn't be too happy with that. So I would say put her in the Northern Wastes. Give reason for her to travel down, which would work rather well, as there's a little bit of distance, unless you go fully by the ocean, but that means that you could at least fight your way through, gain some levels and so on. You know, she's still like the bride of the blood gods, so this kind of fits well with her. I think both would be pretty decent antagonists versus Boris, or the other one just being an FLC. Everything works out well. Again, this is just me kind of spitballing here, but yeah, I think it would be kind of cool, especially since we're going to get a lot of Nurgle, I'm imagining. Like, this hasn't been confirmed by Creative Assembly, but like every single developer that has like touched the Warhammer IP has always been very favorable of Nurgle, so I'm just trying to spitball ideas that isn't really, well, you know. Neferata is also a character that everyone's pretty much waiting for because, well, it's Neferata, you know, she's really popular, there's a lot of interesting lore about her, and she's been around for a long time. Obviously, her main base of operations is actually in this map, so I don't think it's going to be too long until we see her. And let's be completely honest, the vampires kinda need a bit of a rework, so yeah, this was probably the best option to introduce with a character like this. Who she could fight is rather unknown, as, well, she kind of fights with a lot of people. I kind of like the idea of her fighting, say for example, Sinesh's Azazel, as she is known as the most beautiful vampire. Some even call her the most beautiful living thing, well, unliving thing in the whole Warhammer universe, so maybe Azazel would try to corrupt that. It kind of makes sense. That, and I just really want to see Azazel in games, so I'm just really hoping something like this could be possible, as, yeah, I know he's not the best looking model and so on, I imagine he has to get updated, but like, it's a cool character, and really, a lot of Chaos vs. Empire would be kind of boring too. So I think something like this could work out rather well, with Neferata starting out in her usual location, and Azazel starting off maybe in the realm of the Dark Prince, and somewhere else, again with the whole usual thing, as depending who you play is where the character will start. This could be a cool way to introduce, say for example, Dechala as a character that you can only have if you have all 3 games, which will be featured in the Grand Campaign. Maybe in a small island very close to that of Orthwan as she's going to attack the elves. This is a story that you would have expected with Nikari, but Nikari is a base game lord, so kinda works. So now we look towards the Dogs of War, and yeah, this has been a bit of a concern from the fan base, mainly because, well, yeah, a lot of the Dogs of War territories in the south, you know, Talia, Estalia, the Border Princes, aren't really in-game until the big mega map is released at least, but I don't think that they're going to do a DLC which requires all 3 games, or else, well, I'm just going to flat out say it, it's going to piss off the fan base. Instead, I think they're going to do something different, but it will still be allowed. You see, Marienburg is there, and Marienburg is a free city-state which does have a lot of mercenaries, so this kind of makes sense when it comes to the Dogs of War. I think that it would be kind of cool if they implemented the Dogs of War there, say 4 legendary lords, where you would have a Marienburger, a Talian, an Estalian, and more than likely a Border Prince, or anything else that comes up. Keep in mind that Games Workshop have started refreshing this lore too for Warhammer the Old World. So something cool here would be that you would always start in Marienburg if you're playing this specific map. Unless they add in other possible locations, because they can pretty much start anywhere, but I'm thinking this would be a good way to go. So all possible 4 legendary lords would be there, you'd recruit them all the same through maybe missions or something, and when it goes to the main big mega map, Immortal Empire as everyone's calling it, then all the legendary lords will be split to their respective countries, which I think kind of works well. It works very well in the lore. Pretty much anyone can go into Marienburg. Obviously you'll have to pay an entrance fee and you'll have to keep careful with all the gangs and so on, but hey, it's a port city, these things do happen. I think that would work out very well. You're still getting everything, and obviously there would have to be some interesting mechanics involved to be able to recruit units from other countries and so on, which again I'm saying, you know, the Memnon mechanic that was introduced in Troy, but other than that, it would give you incentive to maybe buy the 2 other games if you don't have them, but if you're watching this, I'm assuming you have at least one of them. So then you can have all the different start locations, and maybe it would switch up things a little bit. It really much depends. Hey, it's just, I want to see the Dogs of War. I know that they're not the most popular thing, but they were always an interesting army. Keep in mind that there were other standardized units, and there were units that we wouldn't normally see in, say, for example, the Purvey's Crossbowmen, which are not with the Empire, they're not with the Bretonnians or anything else, so it would be kind of cool. And there's all these weird and wonderful, like, regiments of renown, which could be turned into units, or just add in new types of units, like, for example, pikes would be nice, pike formations and all that type of stuff. Either way, I'd love to see the Dogs of War. There's usually a few different race packs, and, well, unless they do start, like, expanding to the east and so on, we won't see Ind or Nippon. It's possible. I mean, you know, Cathay is right now being shown as one of the smallest nations, despite the fact that lore-wise they're supposed to be one of the biggest. And technically, if you see the map where the Haunted Forest is, right next to that is pretty much the start of the nation of Ind, so it's not out of the question, it's really not. But I believe before we get Ind or Nippon or anything else, we would likely get the Dogs of War first, as Creative Assembly and Games Workshop are likely checking to see how popular Grand Cafe is before potentially doing Ind and Nippon, because, yeah, it's a lot of work, and Games Workshop don't like work. Keep in mind that they like to use the same poses a lot and all that type of stuff, mainly because, yeah, it's not a lot of work. Zinchin DLC I'd imagine being pinned up against Grand Cafe, which would be more or less in the style of, say, the Blue Scribes, as they're trying to get all the magical spells and so on to rebuild Zinch. If you didn't know, Zinch was shattered in the lore. Versus perhaps the Middle Dragon of Grand Cafe, who's supposed to be more of an administrator, likely protecting something of great magical power. As obviously the Southern Dragon is close to Ind and we don't have that, and the Eastern Dragon is close to Nippon and we don't have that. Again, map expansions could work rather well, but I think this is a decent DLC before they start moving towards map expansions and so on. We're not going to get any Zinch versus Cafe themes with Kairos and either of the 2 dragon siblings at the beginning, so obviously having something dedicated story through a DLC could work quite well. I'm going for the Blue Scribes because I kind of like the way they look and so on, and then I'd say that maybe, for example, the Curseling as a FLC Legendary Lord found in the Plains of Illusions. When I mention the fact of, say, Valkyr or the Curseling, I could see it done in such a way that they would be Warriors of Chaos Legendary Lords. It might be kind of cool. All for their respective monogod faction. It's still very unclear as to what they're going to do with the Warriors of Chaos, as there's really not that many undivided characters. So if they decide to make FLCs for other factions, that could work too. I think the theme is alright. Keep in mind that I don't have any names or icons for all the base game Legendary Lords because we don't know exactly where all of them are starting. So this is all potential DLC and FLC, and the map's already looking pretty full, which is pretty good. Obviously, we want this to carry on as much as possible. They did say that they want to keep supporting Warhammer 3 for as long as possible too, so map expansions will have to happen eventually, or else stuff will get a bit too bloated. I'd say an Ogre DLC wouldn't be out of the question too, as they are missing some rather important things from their army book, some iconic units such as, like, well, the Yetis, which were obviously really popular back in the day, so yeah, it's going to happen eventually. For that, obviously, Golfag Maneater would be a good choice, as he's a traveler, he can move around, he can start literally anywhere, so I'm putting him up here in the Northern Waste because, I mean, it could be funny just fighting loads of Chaos stuff. Plus, that adds a lot of variety because Greaser starts in the Mountains of Morn next to Grand Cafe and the Chaos Dwarfs. Skrarg is also starting out next to the Empire and so on, so having Golfag up there would give you some variety, a reason to play another Ogre round without having to feel like you're doing the same thing over and over. I'd say that maybe Brag the Gutsman would be an FLC Legendary Lord and could literally start anywhere too, though more than likely in the Mountains of Morn, though I'm putting him in the side there just as a he can start anywhere type of thing. This could be a way to introduce Festus the Leech Lord, or, well, pretty much any other Nurgle character. Now, you're wondering why I'm pushing Nurgle a lot here. This is because there's a few missing things that could work, say, for example, the Plague Ogres or Chaos Ogres and so on. I'd say that those units would have to come in a Lord Pack versus Ogres, and it could literally bring in the units for every faction too, because they would be reskins too. So Chaos Ogres of Khorne, Chaos Ogres of Slaanesh, Chaos Ogres of Nurgle, Chaos Ogres of Tzeentch. If you buy this DLC, you get a new unit for every playable monogod faction, and obviously then you'd have a few more extra units for the Nurgle faction, because you'd have the Chaos Ogres of Nurgle, which is just Chaos Ogres with the mark, and then Plague Ogres and anything else, because, you know, Nurgle got a lot of attention in Warhammer Fantasy Battle. A cool idea for a DLC, and you guys might not agree with me, would be Joseph Bugman versus the Changeling. Say the whole story of it is kind of silly, where the Changeling changes into Joseph Bugman and steals the recipe for one of the beers, you know, the Sectuple X's or whatever, which would then give a reason for Bugman, who would probably be a Horde. Like, that's how he was lore-wise and so on. Then he would have to go and hunt down the Changeling, which would give him a reason to avoid fighting orcs all the time, as his lore is pretty centered about that. This means dwarves can have something else, as, you know, they are missing a little bit of stuff, plus it would be fun just to have that there. I mean, you could easily put him down where Sufbar is, because obviously there is a little bit of Sufbar, so that kind of works, and then have the Changeling anywhere, but I'm leaving him up there in the realm of Tzeentch, as, well, he can pretty much pop up anywhere. It's just one of those things. In terms of FLC, I'd say that this would be the time again to start normalizing releasing FLC Legendary Lords for a faction which isn't really attached to the DLC stuff. So again, this is very much similar to that what will happen with Reponse, where we would then maybe have a Nurgle demon or anything really, just to kind of fill out the possibilities, as the most we've had so far was what, 6 Legendary Lords per race. I do think that it's still very possible for the main title races to have this. Well, I'm not too sure about Kislev. Obviously new characters will have to be made and so on, but the demons, you know, they kind of deserve loads of different options, which when the world map eventually does come out, the Immortal Empires, depending on how big it is, they can be spread out to all these different other locations and give you more incentive to try out different playstyles and different start positions and so on. So I'd say Epidemius works here, and yeah, you can see it's pretty much just going to be like loads of different lords everywhere. It's not too bad. I wonder how they're gonna do a little more, because obviously the whole adding in of Kislev suggests more, but I'm kind of lost here. And then obviously with the Empire, and we've already done 2 Empire DLC, so I don't think more would be possible. I mean, it could be. Okay, so already the map is pretty full. We have to keep in mind that I've not got the faction icons for all the other factions that have already been revealed, which I believe is what, 10? Let me just do quick math here. There's 2 Kithayans, 2 Kislev, 4 Monogods, 2 Ogre Kingdoms, and obviously the 9th Legendary Lord, which we don't know about. So that's already 11 icons that would be on this map too. That's a lot of different playable starts, and then when you factor in possible DLC in the future and FLC, this could work rather well. Keep in mind that I've been going by DLC and so on, and obviously this could all be wrong, but if you look at it, it's already a decent amount of DLC, it's already a decent amount of Lord Packs and FLC Lords and so on. Warhammer 3 has a lot of potential here when it comes to possible characters. I still believe that map expansions need to happen, and I will go over that in just a second. Obviously then you have to take into account that some factions might end up running out of units. It depends obviously if Games Workshop and Creative Assembly do keep on collaborating, especially with Old World, as more units will be created for that hopefully, because some rosters will need it. Or else we'll just keep getting character packs, I'd say, which is just a Legendary Lord, and that's it, maybe with an accompanying rework or something like that. But I'm hoping that that's like the last option, or just those things that they do in between lulls. Now, in terms of map expansion, it will need to happen eventually. Keep in mind that yes, Warhammer 2 did get expanded every so often. It was mostly to the east, which eventually paved way for, well, just pretty much Malice and Deathmaster, but map expansions are indeed possible. We've seen that happen with, say, for example, 3 Kingdoms, and it's kind of important that it continues to happen, as, well, we want Ind, we want Nippon, and so on. Cafe needs to be a bit bigger if they want to add in the Monkey King, and obviously if they want to add in the other remaining dragons and so on. Because we know that the Monkey King is in the border to Ind and Koresh, and, well, there's no Ind and Koresh in this map. It's still odd, I must say, that the map itself was a really odd choice, especially since the world has been moved around a little bit. So if we look at the Warhammer Fantasy world, keep in mind that a lot has kind of changed if we compare it to that of Warhammer 1, Warhammer 2. There has been changes, Creative Assembly have their own interpretation of it, or it might be the new version which will eventually get in a poster by Games Workshop and so on, because it kind of makes sense. Games Workshop have changed the world map over the years. I mean, Grand Cafe isn't where it's supposed to be originally. And if we look at this map, the Mountains of Morn are much larger, the Darklands are much larger, and so on. Also, from what I've been talking to the community, they say that the map for Game 3 is actually more in a different sense, where the orientation of the map is more like this, obviously shrunk down to be more respective of Warhammer 3, but you can see what I mean. Obviously the Great Bastion has been moved because the Eastern Steppes have been reduced dramatically and all that, but I would say that it's not out of the question to then add in some extra territory. Say something along the lines of this, which keep in mind, yes, this does look big, but remember that the Warhammer 3 map would be different to how the orientation is here and sizing and all that type of confusing stuff. But this would then add Ind for a possible DLC, the lands of Koresh, a little bit of Nippon, and you would get a little bit of everything, and then maybe with the full world map get more. It very much depends, but this then adds in a lot more DLC possibilities. I mean, it kind of looks like everything. You have to keep in mind that obviously it's still a bit weird when you compare a old world map from, I believe this was in the 8th edition book was the last time that this was showcased, to obviously that of Warhammer 3. Or better yet said, that of the Total War series in general, because a lot has changed. Sometimes I look through the map, I'm like, this should be here, this should be here, and so on. I'm just spitballing ideas, and obviously this could radically change. It could be like this, it could be like something completely different. Even when it comes to DLC possibilities, you will notice that I barely even scratched the surface. There could be a lot more. Obviously we haven't seen the game just yet, and they did say that it was going to be, what, 2 times the size of the Eye of the Vortex? So there's a lot of different places. This is just a rough idea, but it does make me hopeful that there's going to be a lot of possibility for DLC, a lot of possibility for factions, replayability will keep on going, and Warhammer 3 will keep getting supported. It's a little bit of a fear that I have after the whole Three Kingdoms thing. Like, you know, it's easy just to go, nope, goodbye. But yeah, this is just a speculation thing. I've not done this for a while, and I thought it would be kind of fun. Let me know what you guys think, and we'll have a bit of a discussion. I think this would be kind of cool, and see where it goes. Obviously, if the map does get expanded further to the east like this, then that opens up for Dark Elf DLC and for High Elf DLC, because these are known territories. It's kind of weird thinking that we might not get DLC for those, because, well, I don't know how they're going to do the whole, let's put Dark Elves and High Elves and stuff like that in the lands of the Northern Wastes, where they would be massive targets, and lore-wise, Sinesh would be throwing nothing but units that way. It just, well, Sinesh thinks that Elven Souls are delicious, and it would be a bit weird. You would not be able to survive up there. Well, you would as a player, because obviously you're better than the AI, but you know what I mean. It's kind of mixing up gameplay with lore, but it does make sense. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. It's been a while since I've done one of these things. It was kind of weird to do, but yeah, it's always nice to think about the future. This will probably be the last time I talk about possible DLC, obviously until launch actually officially happens and we can start looking towards the future and so on. But I figured it might be nice now, because a lot of people were kind of concerned about the map. And yeah, I get it, but maybe this might mean that people would be a bit more calm with the idea, because yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. There's still loads of possible options, and I still think we're going to get a lot of DLC. At least I hope we will, because, yeah, I mean, I like Total War, and Total War Warhammer has been a great game. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms, such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games, where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel has been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.